From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, welcome to Space Brains, the show where we enjoy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey and this is Mark.
Hiya, tonight we're talking about Replicas. It's a 2018 science fiction film directed by Jeffrey Nachmanoff. Nacho Man?
Nachmanoff?
Nachmanoff? Something like that, if I get it right. I looked up how you say Keanu. I can't say it now. Keanu Reeves. I didn't look up Jeffrey Nachmanoff. And it's written by Chad St. John. Is the screenplay based on a story by Stephen Hamill. And it does star the one and only Keanu Reeves, Alice Eve, and Thomas Middleditch.
That's better than the left ditch or the right ditch. The middle one is certainly superior.
Don't want to be in any of those ditches, there's a little bit of irony, which we'll come back to in a moment.
Yes. Okay, so we'll turn back now if you haven't seen this movie because we're going to go all over it. So this is your spoiler warning. And then tune back in and listen to us.
Yeah, hit us up. See what you think about what we think about Replicas. Basically, Replicas, sorry if you're interested, but you've seen this movie, so you know all about it, is a neuroscientist, which is played by Reeves, becomes obsessed with bringing back his family members who die in a ditch.
In a ditch?
Maybe. Well, it's probably more of a river or something, isn't it? I suppose.
You went off the edge.
In a ditch. That's why we're talking about Thomas Middleditch versus left ditch or right ditch. Anyway, his family members all die in this horrific traffic accident. He decides to grab a copy of their memories and then shove them into clones, grow them into a new family, and just go about his daily life.
Just continue on from there.
Nothing to see here, people.
He just introduces some, troubling ideas and concepts throughout the movie, I find. Yeah,
it's a good moral dilemma, isn't it? And it is something that I want to ask you in a little bit. So we'll come back to that. But my first question for you, Surrey, is what was your number one takeaway from Replicas?
My number one takeaway from Replicas is that it is very disturbing and troubling to try and consider which one of your family members you will not keep alive.
Ooh, creepy.
I already know which one that is.
I know you do.
We all know.
We all know.
And it only works, though, for, partner and children. Yeah. It doesn't work for brothers and sisters because that becomes a pretty easy option.
Total.
I know.
Siblings.
It would be harder to figure out which of my two brothers to keep.
Yeah, and I'm one of four. There's a little space brain secret for you tonight, people. One of four children. And I'd be in the same boat. I was a bit of the black sheep, so it'd be like, do we have to have any of them?
Yeah,
Can't I be an only child?
You can only choose one of them. Do I have to choose one of them?
Can't we save some energy? It's good for the environment.
What about, David Bowie?
Why don't we bring him back?
Is he viable?
Can he be my brother?
I never got to have an interview with him. I always wanted to talk to him just for a bit before he ripped himself apart.
Really good point.
Yes.
I like that.
So that was sort of number one, I think, there. And tell me then, is this a hope, a warning, or an
experiment? I think this is literally an experiment movie because here you have a scenario where a man, father, husband literally loses his family. He carries them out of the water, puts their lifeless bodies down, but he has the power and the ability to zap out their memories, their brains, and possibly do something with that, right? So someone like myself, I don't have that power or ability at my fingertips, so I would just have to suffer in this scenario. But it's a perfect example of a story where it's like, a what if story. So to me, it's like a total experiment, and then we just see that experiment play out over 2 hours.
I think so. It almost could have been a hope, almost could have been a warning, but it went down the route of experiment. I think because it could have been a warning, more like say, I guess any number of these you're playing God type things, and then you've Pet Cemetery. That's the first. It's not really science fiction, but again. You can bring your pet back to life. You go bury it there and it comes back, but it's a grumpy pet.
Yeah.
So what if you do it with your family? It's a grumpy family. That's a warning.
Yeah, that's
but
more
this
of a
one
warning.
here, it's like he gets back this family. We don't know if everything's going to be okay or not. Like that isn't really answered for us. There's still some question because, his son puts the mashed potato, misses the plate.
It's not a big deal.
And it's not a big deal.
My kids do that anyway.
His wife occasionally sort of had tinges of where the tree branch skewered it. So you're sort of going, there are some difficulties. Could they resolve in other things? But because it wasn't a warning story, we didn't explore, that they suddenly grow an additional arm at the top of their head or something. Yeah. Or turn into ravening killers.
Yeah, that's right. The Pet Cemetery is a good connection that they've come back, but they've come back. His wife is no longer his wife. She's actually just a grumpy mole. The whole time she's just grumpy. Whereas... his first wife wasn't. So it's like, but that's not what this film does. This film just is like the experiment of like, what if, you could do it, and then you grew them as clones, transferred their brains, and kind of managed to get them back on side with the whole process, right? So to me, it's an experiment. But if you agree or disagree, I would like you to let me know on one of our social media sites.
Of which we have many.
We do.
Google us, you'll find them.
You will. What was your favourite scene, Surrey?
My favourite scene was the scene, and this often happens in movies, it's a scene that made me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And I feel that art in general, but in this case, movie makers have done a good job, like a director, writer has done a good job when there's a scene where I have a physical reaction.
Yeah.
And that could be an exciting chase scene where you actually do feel excited. Your heart starts beating faster and you go, whoa, exciting. Except you don't say that because that's not the way it works.
That's pretty lame.
But in this case here, it made me feel a bit upset and troubled.
Yeah.
And that was where it dawned on, what was the character's name?
Bill.
Yeah, William.
William.
Yeah, it dawned on
Played
William
by Reeves.
that he had 4 pods with which to clone, but 5 people.
Yeah.
No, 3 to clone, but 4 people.
4 people.
4 people to bring back. And that whole sort of argument and writing names down on a piece of paper to choose, and I found that it was upsetting.
Yeah, it was.
Because maybe back when I was in my 20s and single, maybe not as upsetting. I would just go like, I don't see what the problem is. Just choose none. Just get a new family. Why not? What difference does it make? Whereas now I'd be thinking,
trade in the wife. Go for it.
Yeah. Now I just
they love widows.
It would be heartbreaking to not bring back one of my kids.
Of course, yeah.
Heartbreaking.
So
that was and I think Keanu did a great job of being a bit crazy, upset. He wasn't just... he was quite pragmatic in that he tried to come up with an approach, but you could see he was fraying a little bit on the edges there. He wasn't really holding it together.
He also wanted, like he kind of... I think it was good that he started to do the names in the bowl idea and to decide who would obviously not get reincarnated. And then very quickly, wanted to palm that off to the other guy, pick a name. And I liked that. Then that guy was like, no, you've gotten me to do some awful shit tonight already. Get rid of the dead bodies, helping you do this illegal thing, risking my job and my career and my reputation. I'm not then picking who comes back, No. And I liked that. I liked that the other character kind of stood up to him in that moment.
Well, he couldn't though, because... he would run the risk of being blamed.
Yeah.
Why didn't you choose the other one?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that one. Yeah.
But it needed to be Bill's choice. It needed to be his decision. Like it had to be. I mean,
he had to live with. He had to live with his consequences.
Had to live with that. Yeah.
So, what was a bit of science fiction in this film that you liked?
I loved the fact that we had Bill Reeves's character. So his job or his experiment that he was doing for this private company was the possibility of transferring a brain, a human brain, all of the details that we find in a human brain into a machine, a robot. And I just liked, and they did this moment throughout the film a few times. In the beginning of the film, they set it up, and it's a really beautiful to me scene that he pulls up this massive big hologram of the human brain, and he's kind of looking at neurons, and he's like also bringing out computer code, and he's doing it all in front of him. It had a bit of a similarity to Minority Report with Tom Cruise doing this stuff. I think that was sort of
the first. I'm trying to think if I can think of any others. I think that was the first where that was that big sort of sweeping hand gestures to shift things and spin things, and because you'd get that. And for a film presentation or visually, it's much more exciting than some tap away on a keyboard, because you get these big sweeping hand gestures, and you can shakes of the head and pokes and jabs and twists. I think it works very well. It's much more interactive.
I liked in this Replicas, they did it they kind of honed us in on William doing it, and it was like a beautiful big sweeping orchestral music in the background, and it kind of made it like he was directing a symphony and he was just going for it. And I think it really showed us like this was his moment of magic, or his moment of expertise, I suppose is what I want to try to get to. So it really proved that, he's a scientist. This is what he does. This is the thing that he does, and he does it well. And I think Reeves did it really well. Like I think because the actors are working with nothing in front of them, and they're just directing, as you said, pinching and tweaking and prodding and nothing, and yet this all happens under our eyes at the finished product movie.
I often wonder with things like that, if they do, which one they do first. Do they just say, okay, Keanu, try a few of these things, you got to bring this up, you got to turn that.
It's him. It's totally
and
just
then
him.
He just invents movements, and then they just put the graphics underneath.
They put the graphics underneath. No, that's how they would do it, because you can't really then move his fingers and stuff, so, and you can't have that in front of him for real. So it's like he has to act with nothing, and then they put it in. Yeah, it has to be.
I wonder if he did any like real sort of screwy moves that to cut.
There's some great stuff.
If Keanu wants to call up and we'll interview him, we'll talk about this movie.
Totally.
And only this movie, because he hasn't done anything of any significance since or before. So
he's just got The Matrix 4 coming soon.
The Matrix 4.
The fourth installment. So you mentioned before that you were disturbed by the scene of him deciding which family members to keep and not to keep, and it really maybe pulled on your heartstrings a little bit too much. And I agree, it did as well. As a father, it's like, that's perspective, right? As you get older, you're gonna get a bit of perspective in movies. And whereas you said, when you're a 20-year-old and you don't have children or a wife or whatever, you understand like a man hunting down someone that's taken his wife away, but you don't quite get it until you've had a wife or a child and stuff like that.
He wants to pay the guy. Thanks, man.
Thanks, take him.
Life insurance is just massive.
That's great. Would you clone your family?
Who says I haven't already?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking. Because I'm trying to get to the truth here. Sorry. Your family all seems very nice and lovely. Something is wrong.
Well, the biggest problem was, and one of the reasons why it made me uncomfortable with this scene, was because I already had an answer. I've already got an answer. I knew exactly what he had to have done. No random chance at all involved. Bye-bye, mum, save the kids.
Yeah.
Simply because you save the mum but not one of the kids. How the heck do you tell your mum that... Oh, I'm sorry, well, the little girl, she's not with us anymore. I chose to not bring her back.
Well, he decided to do that, didn't he?
And you're like, you can't do that, but... If it was, because it would have been so much easier. Don't bring back Mona. Okay, sad. Yeah, sure. Not happy. You got the kids. kids are so much more, I guess, representative
Flexible
of
as well.
hope and life. Bring the kids back. Tell them they were in a car accident, come out of a coma. They all knew. Remember, Mum died, and you're going to have to go through grief counselling. It's going to be terrible, but it's something that happens to families, and people do get over it, and I don't want to get over it, but they cope with it and
move through it.
They move forward and they grow and they change. But choosing someone randomly not to bring back and then trying to delete it and cover it up, that's what made me really uncomfortable. Was that I just knew that's going to cause problems. Yeah. Turns out by the end of the film, he just brings back the other girl as well, which is kind of cool. But in the first instance, that's what I do. So I already know if I claim. And it's funny because when I was explaining the situation to my wife, I said, it was kind of unpleasant because he had to just choose one person not to bring back. She immediately said, the mother. And I said, oh? She said, oh, yeah, well, she said, I wouldn't want to come back and find out you'd not raised my kids. And I said, that's who I would have chosen as well.
You'd be dead.
And, vice versa as well. If she had to choose, I'd say, well, look, I've had a good life. And again, I wouldn't want to be alive knowing that I've basically taken the place of one of my kids who could have had such an amazing future. Yeah, my future is a bleak night sitting here doing recordings of Space Brains.
Oh, fine. Tell me how you really think it is.
That's okay.
I'm glad I've sent the clone around tonight.
I'm not cloning you tonight. When you die, anyway. So, to talk about me, how did it make you feel?
Well, disturbed. I was a bit disturbed by this movie, and I liked that. Because quite often we've been watching a lot of these science fiction films, and we've looked at some like Interstellar that makes you think about, like a father and a daughter and losing time and things like that. But this was like a psychological science fiction. And I guess we did look at Tau, which was the home with the robot, and what that sort of questions how we kind of communicate and all that. But I felt that this film was, a good mystery thriller. It almost could have not had the science fiction element, and it would be like The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, it'd just be a thriller film in a way. So it's good that it had the science fiction element, of course, and I really felt that the science in this film was heavy. So it'll be interesting when we come back to talk about the science with you later. But it was the thriller part that kind of kept me going. And like you, it made me think about being a father and what I would do in that situation. And also, how would you decide on family members to keep and which ones not to keep? And would you even do that in the first place, even if you had the ability to do that? So it goes back to that real primal question of, like, as a father, what would you do to kind of keep your kids around or your family? Like you were just saying, like you'd rather your kids live than you lived if that was the choice, And so this film brings up that real creepiness of that. I think that really disturbed side of that. And that, again, goes back to why it's just a pure experiment.
Yeah, and I think that it had to be that random choice of a child. And you knew it was going to be Zoe as well, because of all of the "love you, daddy" from Zoe unicorns, and little cute little scribblings on the tables.
Yeah, well, it automatically made it harder for him to forget about her, didn't it? Because she's sort of more present everywhere. But even those little things, I mean, you've gotten them, I get them all the time. They bring them home from school, these little love notes and
my little
mouse pads and
mouse pad from Father's Day 2017.
So you're like, oh shit, you'd wipe your house full of all the memories of your kid, and then all of a sudden the mouse pad is from your kid, So it's like, and that was the dilemma. That's what I was thinking straight away. That you get rid of a kid, like, even if we saw that great scene where he deletes all the memory, it's like, yeah, but the littlest thing could be associated with a kid, couldn't it? It's just the littlest thing. Yeah, it's like the obvious things like photos on the wall and.
But then you've got gaps in the photos. Like if you're walking past, you're going, "That's an
Why
odd
is there
arrangement."
a lot of hinges there with a lot of gaps? But even beyond that, there's little things like maybe they eat breakfast a particular way, or maybe they always they yell at you about the spoon not being warm or cold or whatever. And so it's like, you could delete all the other memories, but then it'd be like, there's something not right about this context, is there? Like, normally, who sits in that chair? You know? Like, you would have that feeling as a human, I think.
Things like, for example, setting up lunches for my kids.
Yeah.
I cut one apple into quarters, and they each get 2 quarters because that fits neatly in this
so suddenly if there was only one kid...
little
what the hell-
lunchbox compartment, it fits 2 quarters of an apple. And so if there's one, I'd get put it in, and I'd be thinking, what do I normally do with the 2 leftovers?
Do I normally throw it away?
I don't do it. Like, you'd go... Because you wouldn't remember having a kid, but you kind of go, it's just, that's really weird. I don't know what I would do with these things.
Yes.
Although it's funny when she said, I don't remember what I ate for dinner last night. Like, I don't either. Don't worry. It's not uncommon.
Yeah. So, the film made me feel a bit...
Yeah, I seriously can't remember what I had for dinner last night. Who knows?
No one cares.
It wasn't important.
It also reminded me a bit of the science fiction film Splice, which is 2009, and it's about a couple of little expert German scientists. I think by memory they're German.
Are they little
and they
in
grow,
particular? Or...
Yeah, I just call everything.
Okay.
They're cute little scientists. They're a couple, and they grow like a clone creature thing in their lab at home. And it grows rapidly, and it's like it kind of it had because that film has those moral questions to it because they're a couple that can't have kids, and so they grow this creature, you know,
monster.
Yeah, and ends up being a bit of a monster. And but I won't ruin what happens in that film. But it's like this had that feeling of that same film. Yeah, and that is a good science fiction film. Actually, go check that out. Splice.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
I have now. So
was this the first time you've watched this film?
It was the first time I watched this film.
And what was that experience like?
I don't think I ever knew that this film existed. Which it's funny because Keanu Reeves is a reasonably... He's a funny actor, isn't he? Because he's in a lot of movies. He is well known because obviously The Matrix, but then also you got to think that John Wick did surprisingly well. Yeah, not my cup of tea, but everyone loves John Wick.
Yeah, they love John Wick.
Except me, I thought it was good, but could take it or leave it. And I guess he's been in a couple other films.
Bill and Ted's.
Bill and Ted's. I love Bill and Ted's. Back in the day, that was
probably technically science fiction, right?
The next third one's out.
Yeah,
it's about to come out anyway.
No, it's out. It's been out, I think. It's already out.
But as a result, though, he's this sort of actor that you don't hear. It's not like they announce Keanu Reeves. Yeah, it's not like Tom Cruise, Arnold Schwarzenegger, or like not so much Arnie these days. But who is it? Who are the big names these days? Jesus, Chris, someone or other, and.
Yeah, I think I'm probably a bit out of the loop. Yeah, the guy from Jurassic Park.
There are at least 2 Chris's.
Chris Pratt. And the Marvel
there's
guys.
3 Chris's. No, there's Chris Pratt, Hemsworth, and Evans.
Yeah.
3 of them. Jeez, how many Chris's do we need?
Yeah, too many.
One of them should change their name.
How many Chris's can be in front of camera at once?
They should have a movie with all 3 of them.
The 3 Chris's?
Yes, with the Chris's. It could be a Christmas movie. Chris for Christmas.
Chris for Christmas.
There's a Chris for everyone.
There is.
That would be awesome. We could...
Copyright Space Brain.
Yes, okay. So,
that sounds like a good idea. I'm sure someone out there is going to hear this and go, hang on a minute, let's make that happen.
If Chris Hemsworth, he's Australian. If he wants to get in touch with us,
we can make that happen.
We'll make it happen. So what about the overall narrative structure of this film?
Well, it's straightforward in that we have the car crash, we have the scientists, we have the car crash. He clones them, he replicates their memories, he implants them. We get to the midpoint, then they're awake. So it's a very just chronological. There's no sort of flashbacks. There's no kind of going over old material. There's no sort of distortion of time or anything like that. So it's just a very chronological, straightforward narrative.
Yeah, and it has the midpoint where everything's happy. Had the establishing sort of
it's the
situation.
I suppose if you look at the Blake Schneider, it's a false victory because the clones are awake and they have that breakfast scene where they all eat and they're all like stuff in their faces, and Mona, the wife, goes for a run, and so it's all like, and he cooks it, he cooks. The daughter says, what about French toast, and what about, and he like keeps cooking it for him.
My breakfast. If you let them at it, they'll go.
Yeah,
can we have waffles? Yeah, sure. Oh, and pancakes. I want pancakes.
And eggs. You're
on,
like,
kids,
no, we're just doing one dish here, people.
not
I'm like, rice bubbles, bang.
It's not a restaurant.
But yeah, like there's that midpoint, but it's probably a bit of a false victory because everything seems okay, but it's not sort of okay.
Yeah, it goes down a bit from there, and then we get a ramping up of tension, and the ending nicely mirrors the opening, but there's some roles have been switched.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting little ending, I thought.
the ending itself, the fact that he is a replica, I suppose, or like a cloned robot doing the procedure. That's kind of the really interesting point, isn't it? Like, because he's transferred his scientific, brilliant brain into that robot, and then they can go off and kind of like clone people and give really rich people a second life. It's like, yeah, that to me is intriguing. That could almost then go to another idea, isn't it? That could be another film.
Yeah, that it does definitely move into some sort of an idea of...
Like, not necessarily a sequel-styled film, but just that idea of, like, a robot that has come from a person repeating the procedure that created them.
What's that movie, Multiplicity?
Yeah, Multiplicity.
Yeah. So it's like, so the robot goes, I'm a bit tired of this. I want to retire to Puerto Rico. I'll just put my brain into another one of these robots.
Yeah,
and that one goes,
send that one
no,
up.
I'm going to Puerto Rico. You got to remember, I had that thought just before you created me.
Yes.
However that works out. So I'm still also wanting... You should have done this a few weeks ago when you were all motivated.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have, damn it. Okay. But you don't think of that, do you?
All right, we need to do Multiplicity.
Multiplicity, the Chris's. Chris for Christmas, Multiplicity style.
But no, that's Michael Keaton, isn't it?
It is Michael Keaton, but I'm saying this is our new movie concept.
Oh, okay.
The multiplicity of Chris's.
Oh, I see.
For Christmas.
So, are you up to anything science fiction related yourself, apart from the Chris's at Christmas?
Actually, I'm going to say the Chris's for Christmas. That's
the movie we're working on from now on.
That's the current one.
That's our new project.
Chris for Christmas.
Hemsworth. Get Hemsworth on the line, people. Hey, you hear me? Get him on the line. We've got an idea. Let's pitch it to him right now on the phone, live while we're doing Space Brains. Chris, we've got an idea. You're not going to say no to this. The 3 Chris's for Christmas.
Yeah, yes. Well, there'll be the Chris of Christmas past, Chris of Christmas future, Chris of Christmas present.
Goodness.
That's just,
writes itself, doesn't it?
That's you. You can't come up with any better than that. Okay, well, Sci-Fi.
And there'll be time travel instead of ghost past present idea.
No.
We'll make it time travel.
I'm not doing any more sci-fi stuff. I'm writing the last paragraph of my Hansel Gretel story.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be up on the. I assume I'm going to get up on the website soon, and I'm going to do like a bit of an audio recording of it. So that'll go up onto a podcast somewhere.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that's almost enough. I've just got to get doing the last little bit, which is what do you call it? A reprise of the whole story. So there's this scene where this guy's being dragged down a staircase, but he's trying to go up, and it's sort of mimicking the flow of the story.
Right.
And then he either fails to succeed or succeeds based on what he learnt or didn't learn in the story, if you like. Yeah, so that's me trying to be autistic.
Sounds good.
Hint, he gets eaten.
But hey, that's a spoiler.
In a good way or a bad way? You've got to find out.
Oh, you've got to read ahead.
Yes, and how about yourself? Anything sci-fi movie related?
No, just except for there's a lot of development stuff. As I said last time, not doing the doco thing. I've decided to put that to bed. So I'm just kind of like returning to my short films. I really do also want Space Brains to go ahead and kind of become, or, not become, but get invested in a film festival. So you and I are talking about some details of that. I also want to create a bit of a Mandra film group as well. So that's another thing that I'm doing with another guy that we're going to kind of talk about and kind of try to get off the ground. So yeah, there's just kind of those sort of things. And then just planning for projects for next year, really. Yeah,
next year's almost here, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, we've got to look at...
Again, with the short film, just kind of, or, going into production of a short film, just thinking maybe like February 2021. So, yeah, you got to kind of get your skates on, start moving that along now, really. So, yeah, I've mentioned that I've got a science fiction time travel script. So it's either going to be that one, or I've kind of got another... I don't know if it's science fiction or more fantasy, but I've got kind of like a little short... weird film that I might do as well. That's a bit of a fantasy idea. I'm not sure if it fits under science fiction, but yeah, so there's just those sort of things bubbling along. I feel like I'm in the really wanky, you could put this in a really wanky analogy that people talk about, like a farmer planting the seeds of their creative ideas. And I'm like, so like there's lots of seeds that are being planted now that then won't be ready to harvest until next year.
Yes, I do know those.
One of those analogies.
I've got that cracking along myself a fair bit there. I just too many things going on the one time.
I don't really feel like I've got too many. My voice, but no, I'm just totally lying right now, bullshitting. But yeah, no, it's just more like I feel like I've been setting myself up, I suppose, to then boom, then it happens. So.
Well, yes,
yeah,
you've got to get your skates on if you want to skate.
You do?
That's the analogy.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Well, let's get our skates on and get into the overview of this plot, cast, crew, awards, and or facts.
Yeah, do you have anything weird about this film that you
real
Googled?
Facts or otherwise?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't look at facts.
Don't look at facts?
Facts are for people who want to know things.
So Keanu Reeves is the main actor in this film who plays the protagonist of William, or they call him Bill. I liked that. I like that he's Bill.
He calls himself William, though.
He calls himself, but everyone else calls him Bill. It's like, no, fuck you, you're Bill. Billy. I'd be sitting back at my desk, my feet up on my desk going, Billy, where you been? Right? It's like, oh, who gave him that job? It's Puerto Rico. I'm here. I know nothing about brain transfers, but I'm here. Someone's paying me.
And is there a fact about Keanu, or just that he is the main character? Is that?
That's my fact. No, but I will say.
I knew that one too. Yeah.
My connection with him is that The Matrix is probably my favourite science fiction film of all time, and so I get a bit excited seeing him in a science fiction film. And he's done a few. He's done a few different ones, and so it's. So when we suggested to watch this, I hadn't really heard anything. I hadn't seen anything. Went in cold watching. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's him, and it's the picture looks like him and a robot. So it's like that's got something to do with robots, but really it doesn't. It's all about cloning. It's all about replicating a human consciousness into another version, and then how that plays out. It's more of a thriller about it, isn't it? It's a moral question about whether we should clone people and the repercussions.
Yeah, they didn't go much because they had the robot. That was the opening scene.
Yeah.
So the opening scene is a helicopter flying in over the water, very Jurassic Park style. It even said Puerto Rico and some island name, a little island. Maybe it doesn't exist. It wasn't Isla. What's the one in Jurassic Park? If you've ever watched Jurassic Park, let me know what it is. Isla. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head now.
I can't. You can't.
Too late at night.
Too late. So it flies in, research lab. Bling. We flick inside, and there's
Bio9.
Bio9. NYN. Like. Was it Terminator? Was Cyberdyne?
Yeah, Cyberdyne.
And I'm pretty sure I've seen the YNE ending. I'm not sure what the significance of that is in science fiction, but
there's a really great shot, isn't it? Like you got the Bio9, they write up Bio9 Industries as a text, but it's like that helicopter is like coming into land, and we've got this kind of building in palm trees. It's like I love that. Like it's so abstract from reality, I think. But so many movies do that, don't they? Big Hollywood movies where it's like, yeah, we're out in the desert and there's a big, huge medical facility, and the choppers come in and land, and So yeah, it's kind of always like a cool thing, and I suppose that's the idea. Is it's like taking scientists and putting them out somewhere really abstract. I mean, does this really happen? Are these industries out in Puerto Rico? And
I have a feeling there are quite a few biomedical ones because it's cheaper.
It's cheaper.
Like, I mean, it's expensive.
You pay a lot to bill, right?
The lab equipment, and you do have an expensive crew, like team of top-notch scientists, and they're doing stuff. So you want cheap grounds because they need big facilities. They need cheap power. They need
and then like cleaning and
all the
normal stuff, cooking, all that's really cheap. Then
you go and do that in San Francisco, and look, you got to be like
Steve Jobs.
Mac
you got to be Apple. Yeah, it's very true. So anyway, we're out there and we have this idea of voiceover that the donor is outside, and so Reeves gets a bit excited by this, and he sort of like checks with the people rushing around. They all start rushing around, all the scientists, like ants, doing
like the
their
emergency
jobs.
Room at a hospital.
Yeah, they're getting ready, and the idea is that, Reeves, he checks. So it's a bit of a save the cat, I suppose, in a way that he's kind of like, oh, no, has everything been signed off? Is everything okay? Can we use this donor? And, it's affirmed that that's fine. We then see the donor come in. It's a... because you think, well, is it a lung? Is it a liver?
Yeah, because it's like a big briefcase.
Yeah, it's like a massive briefcase. But no, they open it up and
it could have been a keyboard, to play synthesizer on.
But no, it's a dead human body, and it's like it looks like a bit of a soldier wound, and it looks like he's been freaking beaten the crap out of, and shot
recently, bashed.
Like there's all sorts. It's like someone tried to stick him back together as well, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, but maybe it's a Puerto Rican military thing going on. It did feel like that, like in Predator. In Predator we have the soldiers are crossing the line. It's all a bit of, then these ones have been stripped up.
We never really got told where they're coming from. Whether they're coming from an active conflict. It could have been an industrial accident.
Yeah, we don't.
More Australian soldiers these days die from industrial accidents than from conflict.
Yeah.
Bit of a that's good though, I guess.
It's like more people die from falling off a ladder than having like a heart attack. So it's like in Australia, so it's like people have accidents off ladders a lot.
Maybe this guy was up a ladder.
He just fell off a ladder. And they couldn't save him, so he died. And we get told that it was.
Well, the irony being they put the form he has to sign to set being a donor at the top of the ladder, and so gets up there, he signs, and then.
I thought you were going to say it's like, as he's dying, can you just sign this form? Okay, now his body's good for your science experiment.
They whack a headpiece on him.
Yeah.
And it sticks a needle in the eye because we love that. It always, things in the eyeball makes a lot of people squeamish. It doesn't really bother me all that much, but a lot of people do it, and they love having close-ups of it happen.
I liked how it kind of like, it's scanned, and you're kind of thinking, oh yeah, it's going to like get the middle of the pupil and then just go right into the middle of the pupil. But it scanned past that, which surprised me, because I'm sure I've seen other films where it's like goes into the pupil. It scans it goes right to the corner bit, doesn't it, in the middle, and then just this big jabbing needle.
The lacrimal gland, yeah. So it sticks in there and it starts scanning, and you get all those graphics of downloading, and then you take this neurotransference, and this is where we get the head bit goes on, and the whole digital symphony as we talked about.
And I will just say it's funny because the robot is a bit crude looking, right? And everything else, it's a modern, sophisticated, well-funded medical lab. But at that point, up until that point, I don't think it had given us any impression of anything sort of futuristic or anything like pushing the science realms. Yet then he puts that thing on his head. It's almost just like an old-fashioned safety goggle, mask thing that you put down in front of your face. He's got he's getting the gloves on. It kind of everything feels a bit crude. I felt like everything felt a bit mechanical and crude and very, now in the world. And yet then all of a sudden he like blasts open with his hands this enormous size digital scan of the brain.
Yeah.
And he can dig really deep into things, and he's doing all sorts of things. And to me, it was just suddenly, it was a beautiful scene. It goes on for a couple of minutes where he's like taking bits out, and he's taking, like he's rectifying things, he's like pulling computer code in as well, like he's doing a lot of things. And to me, it just felt like, wow, this guy's in his zone. This is his expertise. Yeah, and I really liked that moment.
And finally, I say the transfer is complete.
Yep.
He takes his
Energize robot.
little goggles off, energize the robot, and it starts twitching and it moves a hand.
Shaky.
And it looks, and everyone's getting a bit exciting.
Yep.
A bit excited.
Excited.
And then the robot says, "Who am I?" Which is odd because you would have expected, "Where am I?" If you're woken up suddenly, "Where am I?"
Yeah.
Like, who am I? And then he keeps saying, "Sergeant, hey, Sergeant," which I thought was funny. Was use his name.
Yeah.
He's saying, "Who am I?" He says, "Hey, Sergeant, calm down."
Yeah.
Sergeant, my name is not like I kept wanting to say, just say his damn name, explain to him what's happened, but instead, you've had a transference to a synthetic body.
Yeah.
The hell, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, he goes mental.
Starts ripping his face off.
Rips part of his face off, pulls a bit of his chest off, and then they pull the plug, and he powers down.
Yeah. It then goes to Bill has a moment with his boss Jones, and Jones is saying, "Well, shareholders need results. Who would have thought that they want money in return for putting money into this project, and if they don't get results, everything's going to be pulled." So it's a great classic time wrench, isn't it?
It makes you wonder how long they've been going for, because if I saw that as an investor, I'd go, "Holy crap, you are doing the most amazing thing ever." It said, "Who am I?"
Yeah.
My God,
Well, he says that, doesn't he? He said he talked, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Jones says, "I would have been interested in that 6 months ago, but I'm not interested in that anymore." So it's almost like, okay, you've had success this time, which we saw was not success because it just failed. But it's like we can't keep going.
Well, I wonder if it's looking a bit further into the movie there, where at the end we find it's not a biomedical, because that research, even think, okay, well, we can't fund this any further, but we have a body of research that we could sell for billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like, not small money. But clearly, because they're not actually a biomedical research facility, they're I'm going to assume a government
funded, yeah.
And if they're government funded, then they're not going to be selling that. Like, if they run out of money because funding stops sooner or later.
Yeah, funding just stops. Yeah, the government changes.
Then that's it. It's done.
It's done.
Anyway, so he goes back home.
Yeah, and he's got a lovely wife, and he's got a couple of kids, and his wife is a doctor. And he's got kind of like a teenage daughter, kind of a little bit of a prepubescent son, and then a little girl, Zoe. Little Zoe.
She's drawing unicorns and being terribly dimple smiled.
Yeah. I don't know if that was my house, I and my wife would be, don't draw on the bloody kitchen bench. What are you doing?
But then again, I get a feeling Mr. Neuroscience and Doctor, they probably have considerably more cash flow. And so
I think they do.
The concept of replacing a table or getting a cleaner in or something is
but I think easier. Also maybe I get the impression he's so invested in his work as well that then he might come home and it's like, well, he's only home for an hour or so, and he's off again for work. And so there's a payoff, isn't it? It's like, she can draw.
Yes, and they've mentioned foster family. I'm not 100% sure the point of the foster family.
No.
Except maybe the fact then that they're all clones isn't quite so strange later on. But
I'm not too sure. Yeah, but his wife, being a doctor, does question his work and the validity of it. So we've got a good
Ed says it ripped itself apart.
Yeah.
And she's like, that doesn't sound... Something sounds a bit wrong there if this thing is ripping itself apart.
Yeah, because she's saying that, is it ethical that, you transfer someone's consciousness after they're dead, and then this is the result, that they're sort of basically it's a bit of a hell on earth. Yeah, and he relates it to the heart transplant. Heart transplant. That the first person ever had that had 21 days of pain and died. And so it's like, is that ethical? So it's a nice sort of ethical question.
It is good, and you've always got to ask that question: how far can research means be justified by the end?
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, to me, straight away. I mean, this isn't coming from even looking at other films, but it's like you transfer human cloning is the same, but at this point in the film, you're talking about transferring someone's brain into a machine. Like, sure, then they get to live again and stuff, but like, you know, is it going to be successful? Like, the human brain is really complicated. You know,
yeah,
like
what are you going to miss out on?
Yeah,
and that's where a lot of the horror movie trope comes from.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
you miss out on them, and it's particularly when you're talking about robotic components.
Yeah.
You don't have any of the hormones or
don't have the hormones,
bits and pieces going on there to add empathy.
Can that then fall in love or continue love? And yeah, so it's a funny one, isn't it? You know, in that way. Anyway, so then the Foster family are sort of rushing around, getting ready. They're going to go on a holiday on a boat, so they're getting ready. They sort of take off as the weather sets in, and as they're driving along, the weather's kind of getting worse and worse.
Yeah, it's a tropical downpour, and he makes the quip, you know, if you don't like the weather, you just wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like Melbourne, where I lived for a little while.
And maybe he should have waited 5 minutes, because the next thing you know,
with that level of rain coming down,
a tree branch crashes through the front windscreen and just stabs Mona right through the guts, doesn't it?
She lives up to her name and just goes, oh. And of course they run off the road, into the ditch, down into the water, smash, and blacks out. Blacks out. In fact, this film really only covers off Bill's point of view. I think this whole. Do we ever sort of see just Jones talking or just Ed? No, I don't think so.
Not really.
It really is just.
Yeah.
A couple of little flashes of Mona later on, but really, and he blacks out. So the camera sort of fades to black, and then it comes back up, and he's in a car. He's just got a bit of air for himself, and he's searching around for everyone.
There's water. He's in the water.
The next thing, he's pulling up the last body laying little baby Zoe down next to this tragedy of this, dead family, which is really awful to watch.
Yeah.
Again, as a 20-year-old, we kind of go, get onto the cloning bit.
Yeah.
when do they start shooting?
Yeah, I get it. His wife and kids are dead. Move on.
Yeah, tragic.
Next bit.
Tragic. Yeah, so you've got that, scene.
Yeah, that's tough for him.
And he
clone them.
And then he has a bit of a moment there, but then he runs out and waves down Carr, which turned out to be Ed, his buddy, cousin.
No, just buddy.
Foster family cousin, I think so I think he's nominated as a foster cousin.
Ah, okay.
Which is... So I wasn't sure if he was genuinely... Yeah, I think he was just like a brother, as it were, to Bill. But and they pull out the equipment, and we quickly see that they've got the little brain scanner, and you know where that's going. He's going on that, and then he says, well, you got to get rid of the bodies.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Being
asked to get... He's like... Scanning their brains, that's one thing. I've done that to a lot of dead things, but now you want me to dispose of your family.
Yes. So they do. So he does, and there's kind of these couple of scenes that we were talking about earlier that, like it's very morally questioning, isn't it? There's a few scenes here. It's like Bill just kind of keeps pushing the boundaries, and Ed kind of keeps pulling them back. I think that's what I found, like in these scenes. So the whole thing is kind of, well, we should take their minds, and it's like, no, you can't do that. Like, what are you going, like, that's not, well, if we just save their minds now, then we can do something later. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so replicate their brains. And that makes sense.
I could imagine agreeing to that, because you're going, if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it.
We can't do it. Like, they get too dead. And then it's like, you got to get rid of their bodies, because I am going to replicate them, and I can't. It's like, okay, you're going to get rid of bodies? Okay, well, that's maybe going a bit too far.
It is Puerto Rico. Yeah. Maybe it's easier there than
and you are a medical facility that deals with dead bodies, so maybe you could just, maybe there's an incinerator that gets, like turns things to full ash. And
once you've finished stuffing Stephanie in the incinerator, you can put my family.
What's another couple of, kids and stuff? And then it's like, okay, now we're going to clone them. It's like, okay. And then, you don't have enough cloning machines. You've got to pick which one.
It turns out with three cloning vats, and there's problems with cloning. If you get the levels, we don't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so they got three, and this is that heartbreaking moment where he picks it. And this is what got me. He put Mona aside. Said, I'm definitely going to clone her.
I'm keeping her.
Because this is exactly where I went, no, like, I thought, is he putting her aside? And then he just, hang on, that's not really much of a decision now. So I knew he wasn't going to. I think that's what really upset me the most.
But
to me, the clear decision was, sorry, Mona, but I'm sure you want me to save the kids. Like, if that's the choice, that's what we're going to do.
I guess the opposite argument of that is like, the kids need their mum, and then
mum.
Sorry,
they're foster kids. They get another mum.
But you could argue that the kids need their mum, and realistically, it's a little bit more. That's what they used to do in the old days. The kids would come second, whereas we are now in a generation that the kids come first.
Well, that's because it was just like, you just have more kids.
Yeah, just have more kids.
But the mortality rate of children was much higher.
That's right. But then he could have that same rationale now as well, couldn't he? We'll just have another kid.
If they're foster children, they could just foster another kid. What happened to the last foster kid?
But are they foster kids or just their last name Foster? I think the last name was just Foster, right?
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought they were foster kids.
No.
Oh, the foster
family. I think
family.
it's Bill Foster, like the Foster family.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Mind-boggling. Sorry, mind-boggling.
Okay, because I was curious to know why they were why they introduced this idea of them being foster.
I think they're just like the foster family. Foster family. Like your family with your family.
The Hughes family.
Hughes. John Hughes family.
Okay, okay. Suddenly, that just answers a bunch of questions I had about this movie. Straight up.
So, stop the press.
So anyway, this is that scene where he takes Mona out and makes.
Yeah.
That's the chick, and we knew Zoe was going to be chosen because she was the little cutie who did the unicorns and was so sweet.
Yeah.
And the other two kids are sort of a bit grotty because
I would have probably picked Zoe and then one of the teenagers.
Yeah, probably the teenage girl. She's
the teenagers didn't really seem to like you, Bill. So come on.
Yeah, no worries.
And anyway, Edward, he brings the cloning pods, but as you just said, he's only got 3. And he also lets them know that we need a generator so the pods can't lose power. And in 17 days, they will be ready. So then Bill goes off. It's kind of a good moment there. He's got the wrench in Edward's face. It's almost like smack him in the head sort of thing. And he goes off, and the next thing you know, he's got all these car batteries lined up. It's like, that'll work. That'll do it. And there's a great montage here where because Edward says, well, if you're not going to bring back Zoe, what do you do about it? And Bill says, well, he can delete memories. And there's this long montage where he does, he says he can create a blur and sort of delete the memories, and get rid of them, what you might think, did we have another daughter? Is actually as a human, you'll feel it feels like there was someone else here, but
obviously not.
Obviously not. I must be mistaken. So there's kind of about that, and he deletes Zoe out of the memory. And what I like in this scene is that when they go through it, he's got the brain and he's deleting it, and there's a really cool kind of effect they use with the music. That the music goes from that really upbeat orchestral sound that shows him as this amazing scientist, and it starts like that, but then it kind of goes a little bit off kilter. So it's the music goes from happy, upbeat masterpiece to...
And you get the little sounds of a child laughing. And
it's being deleted and being distorted. The sound gets distorted. And I really that stood out to me. I really like that. He's awoken by the police and they're asking about the car batteries. And he says, well, I'm not a victim, and kind of is like, oh, shit, the police might be onto us. But we don't see the police again, funny enough. Puerto Rico! Police only come knocking once. Don't worry, all good now.
Well,
just give them some money. Well, I mean, look.
To be fair, why the hell would this rich scientist in the really wealthy multi-billion-dollar research lab nick car batteries? It's far more likely to be some sort of cocaine lab.
Yeah,
stealing batteries.
It would. And he's a white man that said he didn't do it. All right, so move on. Rich man,
I believe.
I believe. So anyway, the boss
or maybe the police didn't want to know what the answer was. Yeah. Yes, I stole them. Why?
That means we have to do that.
Click, click, boom, boom. It's just that's not a mystery I want to go to. No. If it was a poor guy stealing the batteries, well, okay, he's probably going to recycle a lead and zinc, or he's selling them to run street lights or something or other.
Yeah.
The really rich guy who could just go and buy car batteries, he's doing something really illegal.
Really
he's running a cocaine lab.
Yeah.
Let's not question too tight.
Or cloning bodies.
Look, I'm sorry, Puerto Rico. I could be, overgeneralizing here, but Cuba is pretty close by, and Colombia is, close by. And
they're all close.
It's the whole lot there is all pretty close by, and there is undeniably a lot of cocaine that goes through that area. So
definitely.
So because last time I talked about Puerto Rico, I got a lot of hate mail. From the Puerto Ricans. The Puerto Rican ambassador they sent it to you and not me. Demanded an apology.
So the boss, Jones, then lets them know that the board is shutting them down unless they can get the 345 robot, which was at the start, working by the end of the quarter. And everyone then at work, it's a good sort of up in the stakes, isn't it? So he's decided to do this clone. He's got to watch him 24/7. He's got to kind of grow his family, and then work kind of pulls him back in that, well, if you don't achieve this milestone, the whole thing's gone. And then everyone at work seemed to want a bit of piece of him, didn't they? Or not only Jones, but the others wanted it as well. And while he's at work, he sees that note, that little cute dinosaur from Zoe. So he brings that home from work, because that's the whole thing. Like you delete a kid. It's one thing to, this is what this film I think here was bringing up. It's like, well, you might be able to delete it from the wife and the kid, but what about other people?
Yeah, and yourself.
Yeah, but even just like the police, or like, didn't you have a third child? Yeah, like, you can't just how do you just get rid of a child? That would be a murder.
A family friend or relative, mum, mother-in-law. Hey, how's Zoe?
Yeah.
Who?
And there's perfect timing here, because as he comes home from that, we have this female maths teacher of his son, and she questions him, and it's like, oh, okay, and then Edward, who was at the house, is saying, oh, I told them that they went to grandparents. So he says, they don't have grandparents, it's like, so you can see at that point, like, that's the thing, it's a mess. Like, if you decide to do all this, you've got to kind of like clean up those loose edges.
It's a huge problem. It goes through the phones.
It's great that I like that.
Missed messages and contacts, and
of course, you've got teenage kids, so they've got 100,000 messages.
Zoe's boyfriend is my dad's away. How about you come over? I'm grounded for how long? Till I'm 18. Such a typical dad maneuver.
It's such a dad comment, isn't it? Who would have thought Keanu would put that down? But I like that, because he had all the laptops and the phones and everything set up. At work, the pressure is on for where is Bill? Like the boss is saying, where the hell is he? He's got to get in and save the place. And then the clones,
bing. Ding. Just like a microwave, the little light goes ding, and you can't leave it in the microwave any longer.
Because they just age
your food
really quickly.
Dries out and goes black and gross, and the same will happen to the clones.
So in a panic, he says, well, look, we'll pull them out, and then we'll just sedate them for a couple of days. And Edward's like, well, that's all you're going to have. You're going to have a couple of days to do the memory, otherwise they'll be done, they won't work. You won't be able to transfer the mind, all that. And this whole time, actually, previous to this, we've had a few moments of him. He can't figure out how to transfer the mind still. He can't quite solve that problem.
He doesn't know why the higher functions, the real consciousness doesn't kick in.
Yeah.
Because he's seen movement, he's heard vocalizations, but no...
What
do you call it? The dawning of consciousness, or I can't remember the terminology used, but it doesn't happen.
No, and he's managed to do it with apes, but not, and other animals, but not humans, and not human to robots. So he's failed at the whole thing, and he can't figure out the answer. So anyway, the clones are out. His wife and daughter and son. He's got them sort of in their beds now. He's sedating them, and he has a moment that he's coming up. I feel like the time clock had kind of been used up here.
Yeah, and he's got his fatal syringe. I think he's about to put his wife down and say, sorry, I tried.
Yeah.
And he gets a phone call. And it's, who was this talking?
Jonesy.
Jonesy is talking to him. about, you got again, just putting on the old pressure. And he's touching his wife looking at the screen and there's activity, neural activity.
Yeah.
And which if he gets all excited about, he gets Edward over to find out, to talk to him.
Yep.
And then he points out that, because I was going, neural activity, is it responding to his name? Like,
yeah.
But it was that was just the, the primitive part of the brain responding to physical activity. Like it's just neurons firing from touch.
Yeah.
And that's when he realizes the problem is that sense of self, because we talk about 5 senses, but we do actually have a fair few more senses than that. And one of them is our somatosensory ability, which is the ability to detect that you have a body.
Yeah.
And this is the trick you can do, of course, is you close your eyes and you can touch your nose. You know where your nose is, you know where your hand is, even though you can't see it, but you can feel your body and its position in space.
Yes.
And this is what he's sort of talking about. He's going, okay, so when you chuck them in the robot, they can't feel themselves. They don't know that they exist, and so then the brain just freaks out. This is like the lizard brain freaks out, the brain stem, which sort of makes sense because I guess it wants to deal with lungs and heartbeats and other autonomic functions, and they're not happening. So you got to wonder, like, if you've got a body with no lung or hearts or sense, does the brain work properly? And I guess the answer is no. It goes a bit cray-cray.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably a bit comparable to becoming paralyzed, right? That you kind of like can't feel anything, and how do you understand your body, and you freak out, like thinking, well, like, how do I breathe? Why am I breathing? How do I breathe? Am I dead? Am I alive? So how does a brain question that is a good question. It's a good question.
And that's that famous Metallica song. Yes. So anyway, he reckons then, though, that he's got the answer and he's going to do it. So he goes ahead and do we see that? Like, he's just sort of, he does the transference to his wife with Edward there as a handy helper. And she shivers and shakes.
Yep.
And they go, oh my goodness, it's failed. And then she calms down and then just breathes easily and nicely.
Well, it's nice because she kind of does the same shake that the robot did. And so you think that she's going to like wake up and freak out, but no, she's all good. But then he automatically puts her back to sleep because he says, well, we've got to sort out the house and the life and all the laptops and the mobile phones and all that stuff.
To be fair, if I could just sedate my wife before they let me go clean up the place.
The mess that you've made in the studio here.
Yeah, sometimes it's helpful. If she finds another one of my fingernails on the floor, she'll keep me alive. She has warned me.
Yeah, and this is where we get that nice thing that a montage where, again, another montage, but it's like he cleans up the stuff, but then he sees the Zoe stuff, and it dawns on him that, well, he has to get rid of the pictures of Zoe, he has to get rid of her bed, and so it's quite a sad, depressing montage I found again, because he's rubbing off the dinosaur that she drew on that kitchen bench slowly. And he's like putting her soft toys in the big green bin out the front, and he's like packing photos into a box of memories. Like, it's a sad, because again, that's kind of, he has to let her go, doesn't he? Like, he has to get rid of her.
And by 2 o'clock in the morning or so, he falls into bed, sleeps next to his wife. He's quite pleased with that, I suppose. But he wakes up and she's gone.
No, she's not.
He jumps up and he's like sort of runs down the stairs, rushing about in that strange way that Keanu moves, and gets he sort of walks like a cowboy. Like he has a kind of a really almost like a determined sort of, the way he moves is sort of has a determination to it, which is
he does
particular to him.
It is.
And he comes in and they're in the kitchen having breakfast, and Mum's about to go for a run in the morning.
She says she feels fantastic.
I've tried doing that myself. I do like going for runs and rides, but I can't do it in the morning. I just can't.
It's because you're not a clone.
Oh, maybe I should clone myself.
Because if you imagine that, you would be your age, but your body is only technically...
hours, 17 days old.
17 days, 18 days old, right? So it's like... It's like when you have a newborn baby. I mean, those babies are amazing, aren't they? So it's like...
That would be suspicious too. If I woke up and suddenly
felt so good in your body.
Because you're not going to have any calluses.
No.
So, because I got a few calluses on my feet from running and so on. And, I've got little broken pinky fingers got broken.
Bumps and
my nose is broken from an altercation at one time.
Yes, mine too.
And then
breathing problems.
Yeah.
All those things, your teeth.
All these things. Yeah, it's just, wow. You'd really kind of... Because that's not in your genetic method.
What even about your eyesight as well? Because my eyesight's gone downhill as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
And your ears, like your hearing would be louder. Right?
Wow, I want to be cloned now.
That'd be
awesome.
Totally.
This is great. But anyway, she goes off for a run, and the kids are
just eating everything.
Yeah, well, I think that's what kids do. I think it's more the case that rather than being the usual father of going, no, you've had your breakfast, move on. Like, this is not a kitchen. He decides the kitchen's open. He's just so delighted to be able to serve. And I think that's one of those things you take, your kids for granted so much that I want this for breakfast, I want that for breakfast. And you kind of go, just have the cereal. There's a porridge. You know how to make it.
I need my cup of tea and, I'm asleep. But whereas really being in the moment and going, oh, wow, you're my kid.
He was pleased. So he made a whole bunch of stuff for them. And he's... Mona going for her run?
Yeah, this is where she runs. And she's running, and all of a sudden she feels a bit weird.
Yeah.
And she holds her belly, which I thought was about being stabbed in the belly. Like, she's having a bit of a freak out moment, weird ass memory thing, wasn't she?
Yeah, and just sort of frowning and moving on.
And then here we have Edward calls and says there's a donor, and we've got to make this donor work. Bill needs to get in there and make 3, 4, 5 work. The robot transfer needs to work now. Otherwise, the place is going to be shutting down. And he goes and he leaves the clone family kind of not wanting to leave them, which is because the boy is not really eating out of a bowl or anything. And that's what I thought. I thought, you could implant that memory, but maybe some of those little things that we learn, like how to eat with a spoon and stuff, would that transfer across, or is that kind of...
He tipped a lot of syrup on his pancake.
Yeah, and
I would expect, a lot, and he's not... At first I thought,
And look, he is a teenage boy. I think when you are a teenage boy, you do a bit of that.
My kids put
Yeah, they do
sometimes
that.
I've got to say, that's probably enough.
And even as a parent, sometimes you pour, because they would just go glug, glug,
But
glug,
this was over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Edward goes, Willie Bill, he goes in.
Billy
Willie, he goes in, and it's the same deal. There's a soldier there.
Yeah.
They've got it up. They're looking, his viability, 64% is viable. Do you concur? Yeah. And Bill says, no, I do not concur. It's oddly formal, isn't it?
Yeah,
concur. No, I do not concur. Agree? Can I say agree?
Can I just say disagree? I disagree.
It's not viable. Can I just say it? No, concur. You've got to say concur.
If you don't say concur, I'm pushing the button.
It's
too late.
Yes. And Jones sort of is obviously a little bit pissed, and Ed was like, what's going on? And Bill, he says, no, he couldn't do it. And fair enough, because he knows it's not going to work. It would just be another tragedy. So he's not going to do it. But he's got a great idea.
He does.
He is going to go to the toilet and strain hard.
He is.
I was expecting a bit of toilet humour there, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. He rushes into the toilet with his laptop and takes the machine, and it's what you were talking about. We like a good needle in the eye, and he's going to do it to himself here. Don't you always love that when a scientist wants to do this shit to themselves? And because the thing is, they do it to people that these are dead people or dead soldiers, and whereas the scientist is going to do it to them. They're awake on the toilet,
No, he is.
So he lines him all up. He lines himself all up.
Sanitary place to do it. You would have thought.
No. I was
sticking a needle in your eye.
Surely he could just do it in his own office anyway. I mean, he'd have a private room, wouldn't he?
But Jonesy, the
Jones
boss
walks in, he's like, you're doing a number 2. Caught ya.
I do not like it when people talk to me on the toilet.
No, I don't like it either.
It's a weird breach of etiquette.
Well and truly.
Even at the sink where you're washing hands, it still feels a little bit too close to the business.
I got to say, with 3 little kids, and you must have had this, and you still might now, because I still have it now, it's there is no privacy with the kids.
No.
And you're on the toilet and they're like banging on the door, whatever. All right. And the worst is if they're upset or crying or something, you're like,
They're coming for a hug.
I can't do anything right now. I'm literally doing something that has nothing to do with you, and I need like a minute or two or whatever. And I mean, Tanya always joked years ago, like the fingers come under the door, like a zombie finger can even come under the door. But then I've even had my wife like come talk to me. I'm like, can I have the 5 minutes on the toilet? Like, can I? Can you? And it's the same here. It's like, Jonesy, I mean...
I'm sticking a needle in my eye. Yeah. That's stressful enough. I don't need you reminding me again.
Look, this is how he goes to the toilet, right? He puts a needle in his eye to go do a shit. Let him do a shit, okay?
That's where the on button is.
That's right. That's how he just does it, okay?
Dunk.
Doink.
Oh. That's what I've been doing wrong all this time.
Right. It's a needle in the eye at the same time, sorry. A bit of acupuncture. And Jonesy then kind of is like, a bit... He's dirty at him the fact that he didn't do the procedure, and they don't. It's pretty much he says a line. I don't think I actually wrote it down, but he actually says to him, shame that didn't work, and Reeves says, we'll get it next time, and he's like, if there is a next time, if we're lucky, there's a next time or something. So he doesn't, and good old Billy sticks the socket into his eye.
Yeah, it gets a bit of old scan.
And transfers his brain across.
Well, see, I think this is a good idea because at the very least, you're not going to get the whole who am I business because he will be transferring across knowing full well
the process,
what he's doing and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think what he was explaining there, he's also able to then, he can, because he's alive and he knows the whole thing, he can actually record his own feelings, his own autonomic system as part of the transfer.
Yeah, so learn
So
more.
in fact, maybe this process wouldn't work with a corpse, or maybe he was intending to use his own recording as the baseline. It would still be a bit of a weird thing, possible rejection, but that's what. So he gets back home anyway.
Yeah, and his kids are trying to look for their phones, and Mona has a bit of a weird feeling of, there's sort of something missing.
Yeah, she goes, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night, which again, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. And then, there's something not right, something very wrong. Sophie's in bed with a fever. That was the dinner also where I think Matt threw potatoes.
No, that's later. That's later.
Yeah. Okay. And so he says, you'll be all right in the morning.
Yeah. And then he goes off. So she goes off to bed. He creates the algorithm. So for transferring his brain over so that it will be all seamless. He then runs because Sophie is screaming out about her mum dying. So he goes to her and he comforts her and he explains like it's a bad dream. It's not a big deal. But he decides then he takes her downstairs and he replugs her brain back in.
This was something I didn't explore in this film, but this opens up the whole thing. So you could record the brain back out, edit it, and put it back in.
Again.
Ooh, like that opens up all sorts of possibilities. Like,
it does.
Imagine PTSD, trauma.
Yeah. Or
you
anything,
could just
right?
you bring it in and let's just fuzz that a little bit so it's not quite so severe.
Wouldn't a man like this get a bit addicted to that? Like he'd have an argument with his wife and she's like, where have you been? I've been out drinking. You're not supposed to be drinking. It's a week. Blah, blah, blah. Have a big old fight. It's like, yeah, she's asleep now. I'm just going to change her memory.
I won
Delete that I went out on a Wednesday night and had a lot of drinks. She wakes up and like, what did you do last night? I was here all night, like, honey.
Well, it's more the case is you were recording a podcast till 11 o'clock at night. That's too late, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to edit that one.
Just edit that one out of your brain.
Weren't you going to do Space Brains last night?
No, we never did that. I don't know. What's Space Brains?
Space Brains? Hang on.
Delete that. I deleted too much. I need to go back.
Every day you'd be deleting the day before.
All the mistakes of Christmas past again. And the thing is, he decides to do that, but then Mona is like, "What the is going on down here?"
That's right. He's mid messing with Sophie. Brain.
And Mona comes in and catches him.
Okay. catches him, and he's like, it's like he's playing Xbox with Sophie's brain, and then he quickly puts the Xbox controller down and covering up the little name. Zoe, was that Zoe's one that he covered up? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think he does. Anyway, he actually just tells her everything.
I was very proud of him for doing that. It would have been easy for him to try and then jab her with a needle and then edit that out or something stupid.
Yeah. And he does. He tells her everything. And the thing is, she's really upset. She's like, you deleted a child, all this kind of stuff. But he says to her that, he was faced with all of their lifeless bodies in front of him, and he did what he thought was the best thing. And she actually, you can tell she's not happy, because I know you as a man, as a husband, knows your wife's not happy, but she wasn't happy about it, but she reaches out and holds his hand.
I actually thought
that was kind of nice.
It did portray a very strong relationship, and you can understand then why he would have had such trouble letting Mona go as well, because they clearly were very close.
Yeah.
They had some discussions about research and things, but they had a very strong relationship.
And I liked that, because to me it was a very, you could imagine her very easily going, "You're an asshole," like I'm going to go to the police, and we've got to, like, this is just totally outside of it. But the way him saying that to her kind of resonated in that, like that would be a really hard. She was empathetic to it. The fact that as a man, as a father, he kind of pulled everyone's body out of the river and then decided to replicate them.
Yeah, but he asked what she would do, and the thing that she was a doctor. Yeah, I'm sure she's wished she could have saved more people as well.
That's right, yeah. So that was nice. And then, over dinner, the three confront him over this weird memory, and also the scribbling. One of them says something about Zoe.
Yeah, the name Zoe was scribbled on the back of her wardrobe.
Yeah, why is that?
Then, of course, Mona says, and there was a bunk bed. Why do we have a bunk bed?
And this is what I meant by, in a human brain, you could delete, like you could literally, because the way he did it was like search for files, like on a computer, and delete things. But a human brain's not like that. There would be some, like the color red could be like, a red bike, a little girl's red bike. You know what I mean?
Earlier, when they're doing the Christmas tree shopping, which we didn't cover in our little synopsis here, because it's neither here nor there. It's part of the fun and gamesy bit. She sees a girl in a red dress. And pauses for a moment, looks, and so forth. But, just when it's looking like it's going to be really difficult to talk about Zoe. Yeah, Jones
suddenly rocks up.
Jones pops up and asks to talk to him, and they go outside. And reveals, of course, that Edward couldn't keep his trap shut because, he knows... He says, subjects 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8... successful, and they're property of Bionine, which is pretty ruthless, really.
Yeah, but true, because that they are property, really, because those machines they came out of, you grew them in them, and
and so he's saying I'm making all this money as a biomedical company. Yeah. And he says, we're not a biomedical company.
Who do you think we are?
We're the big bad.
We're the big bad guys. I mean, and it says a good thing where he goes, imagine the best pilot in 1,000 planes, flying for an army, and it's like, so the brain transfer process, I guess the idea then is like, if you could take the best pilot and then put them into a robot, but then you could actually just duplicate that. So you could duplicate that brain into 1,000
That
pilots.
wouldn't lead to any bad consequences.
No, it wouldn't at all. And so he says, well, give me the algorithm and Jones says, you'll get the thing that you wanted all along, which is a proper goodbye. Say goodbye to them, have sex with your wife, hug your children, just have a solid goodbye, And, of course, he says, sure, I'll get you the algorithm, but we know he's going to get up to mischief.
And he does.
He does.
He grabs the bits and pieces, grabs his family, convinces his wife, who, again, accepts. And I think it probably does help that they're in Puerto Rico, not in America, because if they are at home, surrounded by people, familiar places and people and family, it would be harder to accept. But I think, they're a bit isolated out there.
They are,
really.
yeah.
It didn't really go into that much, except you've got to think, they're on this... They're not even on the main island of Puerto Rico. I think they're on like a sub-island. I don't know if there's such a thing exists, but there is a...
Got the impression that they were.
I got the impression that they're not like somewhere with like... And even the police came up and said, "Do you speak Spanish?" No. So...
Okay.
So anyway, he says...
Not guilty.
We've got to go. We've got to run for it. They probably had security briefings. I know that, again, not Puerto Rico, but there are very nearby unfriendly nations who would like to kidnap an important research scientist for the Americans.
So anyway, Bill runs inside to get the algorithm, tells the wife and that we have to get out. At the same time, the boss messages, he sends a message and there's these suited, armed men outside actually the house.
They're called goons.
Yeah. And they, they're in the good old-fashioned Mr. Smith sort of outfit.
Black suits,
black ties. Long hair, ponytails.
But they don't make it look good.
No, they don't look good. And they kind of get out and he says, just, stand by for my message. Bill returns with the algorithm, in the machine package thing, whatever it is that he's got.
Hand it to him.
And he goes to hand it to him, but he sticks him with a needle. Take that.
And then just to add it on there, smacks him in the head.
With the algorithm.
And that's where he runs inside and wraps it in tinfoil. That was funny. He's searching all the different drawers and finally the wife said, "What are you doing?" Was there alpha ice in the top drawer there? Oh, it goes over there. There's a very domestic little moment there. Chucks it in there and they
start zapping it.
They all run out and jump in the car, drive off. The goons sort of go and they're too late.
Yeah,
and
they
run
find
off
the boss. Yeah.
They get Jones and they go tearing off through the city streets.
Yeah.
They find out then they're getting followed.
Yes.
And they go, how they follow us? Trackers. And he says, I know all the animal subjects, have trackers in them.
In the spine.
Powered by the central nervous system. And so she, being a doctor, she goes, well, let's take us to the El Medicilo Clinico.
Yeah, and I liked that because he's like, you can't cut him out. You can't get rid of them. And she's like, no, take him to the hospital. And it's like, and he goes, well, okay, like I'm going to put some faith in your expertise. And because it seems like from his scientific brain, no, you can't get rid of these things. You can't get rid of the trackers. We just have to run, And so anyway, they go to a hospital, and she goes into a medical room, and gets the daughter to lie down, and she explains that if we zap it with the cardiac arrest machine, the zappers, the good old zappers.
As we all know they're called.
As we know, those things that they always do in Hollywood, which don't really work like that, but the defibrillators. Clear. Again. Up the ante. They're very dramatic, but they're not very realistic.
Yeah,
from what a defib works.
Work as often as what they'd like to say in the movies.
Well, I did first aid training, and the first time I did, I'm like, oh my God, it's nothing like the fucking movies. It's like, no, just put them on. You can't get electrocuted. Don't worry, you're fine. Just stand back, put them on. Like a monkey can operate them. The defib just does it. And the defib even checks if you need to do it. The defib won't work if it can detect a heartbeat.
The automated defib. I didn't even know that until someone at work accidentally opened one and started talking.
You can't. But even if you do that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. It can't. There's nothing. It can't do anything to anyone that's actually got a heartbeat. And even if you don't have a heartbeat, even then it's fine. It's none of this charge it up, put more. There's water on it. If there was water on it, what it's going to do is it's going to singe the person you put it on. It's going to singe off their hair like a motherfucker. But it's not going to be anything bad to you. Sorry, you're just standing there going, okay.
Yeah,
and the machine just says to you, stand back, stand clear. Anyway, so that's me going off on a rant. But she has got a clever thing that if you do that, you could possibly zap the tracker.
Overload them.
the tracker, that's what I was looking for, yeah.
And one by one.
She does it.
She does, and the lights spread out, and we're just up to Mona, and she's
the goons are coming, they've got the tracker.
Her heart rate's gone up, and she's got to calm down, and someone's coming, and then they step into the room, but it was some old person's room.
Yeah, it's a decoy. They've already put it into the cockroach, haven't they?
See, I think it's more the case of, even though the little map display, the little display they had, seemed to show a bit of a floor plan, you got to wonder, how the heck did they get a floor plan of the hospital for the trackers to show what room?
Yeah, it would have been a bit iffy, wouldn't it?
I think it's more the case that they just would have had a distance and a direction, and they went, and they were actually in the room behind the wall that the woman, she was in
the wrong floor.
Wrong floor,
Yeah, like instead of being the third floor, you're on the second floor.
Anyway, they get all the trackers out, and then they hightail it out of there. They're going to go for the boat. And they do. They go for the boat. And it's nice. And hussy.
It's nice because they go for that, and then the boss gets the phone call that they lost them, Jones, and he rings someone, but you don't see who.
Redial.
Yeah, he hits redial, and he's like, "Where are they?" And it's like, "Oh, who's he talking to?" So it's a good old thriller move. And they get to the pier. Bill tells his wife and children to wait. He's going to check if the boat is there. It was the boat from the trip. So they run down. He runs down to the boat, and he's like, "Oh, the keys should be in the esky." And he's like, looking, he can't find the esky. And then with that, the lights and the suitor men rock up, and they take the kids, don't they?
Yes, and they go, he's going to have to follow them. So, and he does.
And he does. He comes back, and when he gets there, Edward is obviously the kind of plant, so to speak. You know, he obviously spoke to Jones earlier and he'd given away information earlier in the film, but we didn't know. And he says, look, if we just sort of play the game, we'll be okay. Like, I won't lose my job, and, my career won't be over. We won't be going to jail.
Yeah, and he says, are you kidding? He's going to kill us all.
Yeah. Anyway, so the boss threatens to kill Mona, and Bill jumps in front of her, and he goes, and he just kills Edward.
Yeah.
As a way of, upping the stakes, right? Like, it's like, oh, okay.
Well, it does let you know you're serious, because there's one thing to have someone say, I'm going to shoot your wife if you don't do it. You got to think, well...
Yeah, but
this is the boss that I've worked with. Yeah, he's a bit of a hard case, but whatever. And then he shoots Edward, you kind of go, okay, now he is just going to shoot my family, isn't he? That's just the end of it.
Yeah.
So he says, I'll go make your algorithm for you. And so he runs off into the lab
and puts the algorithm into 3, 4, 5.
Well, he wasn't supposed to. I think he was just supposed to recreate the algorithm, but he has his own brain that he sticks in, and 3, 4, 5 energizes.
Yeah.
And then he comes back.
He does, and he's locked down, but he breaks free. Bill gives Jones the algorithm, and he's like, well, you've given me everything. I can just kill your family anyway. Break the deal. But then the robot smashes in, and of course he's got one of the goons and just flings him across the room, right? And everyone's like, oh, sugar, these things are a bit stronger than what we should have ever made. And where's the fail-safe button? I mean, why don't we make these robots without any sort of fail-safe button, right? I don't know. And of course, it's Bill. It's Bill in the robot. So we've got Bill, the living, breathing human, but he's transferred a version of his brain into this robot, and this robot's just going to do everything it takes to save the family.
Yeah, and it does it. It charges in there. They shoot at it, but it's shooting.
You can't stop it. It's a freaking killer machine.
And he just starts smacking everyone to pieces,
including Jones. So then Bill and that escape with the kids.
Jump in the car.
They get in the car and they're going to go, but he looks at his wife and he's like, "No." I think the point was he didn't want him to kill Jones, right? Is that
He didn't want to kill Jones. I think it was also the case of this doesn't clear us from anything. Cause
no.
I think Jones said at some point, you get rid of me.
That's right.
They'll just replace me. I'm not the top of this.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll just get another version of me, yeah. So he goes back in. The robot is kind of smashing the shit out of Jones. He's punching him. He's whacking his head around. And he tells him to stop, Bill. And then he goes up and he says, you can be a rich man and we can offer this as a service. You come back as a clone, right?
Yeah.
Live again.
Good. So they get the needle in his eyeball.
Yep.
And there's blood leaking out of his head because he's dying. He's dead.
He's dying, yeah.
He's not around.
And the robot version says, well, I'll stay here and grow him and look after him, do the procedure with him. And so, and Bill kind of has a little moment with Edward, who's dead on the floor, and leaves. And then we get 17 days later, and the cloning is complete. We get told the cloning is complete, and so you think, okay, it's probably Jones, and maybe it is Jones. But we have this moment on the beach that Mona, she's there with the teenagers, and then out of the distance, Bill brings along Zoe.
That'll be a strange reunion.
It would be.
Mum will be going, there's so many things I don't remember about you.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought her.
I remember having something. Don't know when her birthday is.
I don't really remember much about you, but she was very happy to see it.
Oh, yeah. Well, why wouldn't you?
Also
I mean, if you get like, I'm sure I'd get like a little mug that says World's Greatest Dad and a mouse pad and
yeah,
I get like a bookmark that's You're My Diamond Dharma and Minecraft.
And we then have, which kind of like, yeah, surprised me, but then we get told we're in Dubai and we have this kind of like rich elder man in a wheelchair kind of coming along and he, with, you know, a beautiful looking sort of young woman bringing him down this corridor, kind of come around and it's Jones, and Jones says to him, well, you can't put a price on a second life, and he wheels him into this lab room overlooking Dubai, the cityscape. And he says, well, you know, Bill, you know, take it away. And you sort of, it's interesting because from the long shot, it looks like Keanu Reeves, but then he hits the robot and he turns around, he's in a suit and he's like, yeah, I can't remember what he says, but he's like, start the
Exterminate.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, let's do it. So, yeah, the whole thing there is that, as I said earlier, like that could almost be another movie from that point, it feels.
Yeah, that'd be the opening scene.
That could be the opening scene, yeah, and we go from there. And the end, roll credits, sorry. So where does this film sit on your preference ladder? Where do you think people should watch it in the order of science? In the ones that we've looked at so far.
Well,
on Space.
Yeah, I put it at, this one's a number 23 out of 33.
There's probably a few more on that list, actually, maybe, that you're missing.
Well, I've got the classics there as well. So it's in there with near Serenity, just a bit below Serenity, a bit above Gora, Darkest Dawn, and so on.
Yeah, I think mine...
Sort of, like I said, it's a thriller. I could almost sort of put it up there. And this is why I sort of want to go through some of this ladder here a bit, because it would go nicely with Anon, which was another sort of thriller cop one.
Yes.
And in fact, the reason I chose this one was because we just watched Surrogates, which is kind of about people inhabiting robots. And this one here is people having a second life in clones and robots.
Yes.
So, and yourself?
I think for me, I'm going to go a little bit higher up the rung, but I agree at the same time. So it's about number 10 rung for me sort of thing. I think what really hooked me is that it's more disturbing. It's a bit more thriller. It's a bit more human feelings in this. If you are a dad or a parent, I kind of think it really kind of draws a bit on those heartstrings. I also really liked how scientific they made the procedure. Like, I think it was kind of done in a way that was showing that they were very scientific. Like you said before, like I concur, but I think maybe that wording wasn't quite right, but it felt like this was a real procedure at a real facility. Like I felt like they put time and effort into the science of the procedures, you know. And I think Reeves actually, he's a little bit devoid of emotion in his job, and then very emotional with his family. So it's kind of like, it felt more scientific to me, this procedure. It felt more realistic, like this is maybe what it would be like, if this was a real lab. So, it kind of comes in. It's an interesting concept and a very morally questioning the way we are. And I agree, like with Anon is another one that kind of questioned our morals, and maybe Tao as well, that questioning robot algorithm thinking versus, a scientist that creates the algorithms. And
are we more than that? Just is there a soul, basically? Are we more than just the sum of our experiences and what we've learned, or is there something intrinsic to a human or to a life, a consciousness? That
Which is pretty much what his wife says to him. That's kind of is that theme of the film, isn't it? She says, I don't know if what you're doing is actually ethically correct. Like, is this an okay thing to do? Is there more to it? And she does, doesn't she? She does also say, is there more to a human than just the consciousness? Like that, and that's always that question. Is like, again, going back to Pet Cemeteries, and even though that's not the science, that's the question in that film. Like, you bring someone back to life, but then they're not the same person anymore. So it's the same here. It's like, if you clone someone, are they truly the same person, or are they a different version of that same person? And then the ethical question is like, well, should you clone them in the first place?
Well, yeah. And a lot of nations around the world have banned cloning experimentation.
Yeah, even on a therapeutic level,
Yeah, which I think is not the right way to do it, but
it's an interesting. It is obviously something that as humans we are uncomfortable about, I suppose. So that does lead into what science. This film is, to me, pretty bloody scientific. Sorry, what science do you want to talk about?
Well, cloning.
I've
already talked about brain transfers and consciousness, but cloning is interesting, and it's something that is in a lot of science fiction films. Is often this question of, are clones real people?
Yes.
There's TV series. What was it?
Dark Angel.
Was it? Yeah, with clones, with vat-grown super soldiers. And there's always this thought, because one of the problems we have in science fiction is they always show clones as being something that grows it's 17 days to adulthood.
17 days, yeah.
And, I mean, the reality of it, why we don't have that ability. We can clone people and animals, but we can't grow them super fast.
No.
So if you were to clone a clone army, you would have to wait 20 years or however long it takes.
It's a long time. It's a long time.
But interestingly enough, in Star Wars, the clone army took many years.
Yeah.
So it's sort of strange considering they've got the Force and other powers. But so cloning. I think the most famous cloning is Dolly the sheep.
Yes.
We all heard about that. Dolly in the late 90s, 96.
We know Dolly. Yep.
Just July 5, 1996 was her birthday. She died at age 6 in 2003 of a lung illness probably not related to her cloning nature.
No.
It's common for laboratory animals to get this particular illness because they don't have a lot of fresh outside air, which is... I know that's another ethical consideration, of course, isn't it? So the question is, how do we clone? I have done cloning.
Have you?
Yes.
What have you?
I have cloned numerous organisms.
Have you?
Yes.
Sea monkeys?
No, my grapevines.
Grapevines,
blueberries is what I've cloned. And that's simply by taking a cutting from. So a clone is something that is genetically identical to its parents, as opposed to a normal offspring, which would have multiple parents with a variety of genetic material.
I'm disappointed that you haven't cloned sea monkeys.
No. Sea men? No, hang on, we're not going to go there. Sea people, I mean.
Yeah.
But
sure.
Yeah, so we've been cloning plants since we've figured out that you can just, chop a chunk off an olive tree and bury it in the ground and it'll grow more olive trees.
Yeah.
And likewise, any number of plants will do the same thing. If you stick a bit of them in the ground, they'll just start growing.
Is that genetically the same as the first plant, but?
Yeah.
Would that be genetically the same?
In
identical?
Fact, pink lady apples, apple trees are almost all clones.
Right.
So the pink lady tree, the pink lady apples that you buy in the shops
Yeah.
are off clones of the original pink lady, which is down south near, I want to say it's near Donnybrook or Manjimup. It's somewhere around there. The original pink lady apple tree is there. And likewise, the citrus, what is it, the navel orange?
Orange, yeah.
Clones. So, and bananas, quite famously, the Cavendish banana is on the verge of extinction because it's all the one plant that's been propagated and propagated and propagated, and now there's a disease which affects it, and it affects all of them equally. Whereas normally if you have a genetically diverse species, then some people are immune. Some members of that species are immune to any disease just due to random fluctuations.
Yeah,
In fact, they found, I think, three people, last count I saw, who are genetically immune to AIDS, for example.
Yeah.
Just naturally, just by variation and variety of genetics, they just cannot get it, which is led to some novel possible treatments and so forth, which is great. But
we would see that with COVID, right? There would be some percentage of people that would just, they could be like, you could shove a tissue of COVID right in their fucking face. They could drink a cup of it. Oh. They just lick your butt crack sweat. And when you have COVID, and they would be okay. I mean, I don't know why they would, but they would.
We are not endorsing any of these activities to try and find out. Okay, no. And it's not the usual
just have
process.
Natural antibodies, right?
Yeah, just natural antibodies. Maybe they got something earlier, or maybe they just have a different blood type that does it.
Yeah.
In any case, that's one type of cloning is where you get like a plant, you chop a bit off and you stick it and it regrows. You can also get, there are some worms, some bacteria and so forth which do the same deal. The other type of cloning is where you basically make twins. So you get an embryo, and they've done this with mice and monkeys and stuff.
Yeah.
You get an embryo and it grows, to like say 4 cells, and then you very, very carefully split them into 2 cells again at the point where they're like 4 cells or 8 cells, they're a blastocyst, I think they're called. They're really just undifferentiated stem cells. Like they are potentially every cell in your body.
Yeah.
Like there's literally eight of them. And in the human body, there's like millions of cells.
Yeah.
So you split it down the middle, and then if you're lucky, they each just continue multiplying and grow into new clones.
Yeah.
And they do this for animals. They do it to implant twins in various things. It's not common. This is not a standard sort of feature, but it's been done.
Yep.
And it's fairly well understood. It's not a very useful feature, except in terms of if you want to have twins to research the effect of one animal and then have a control, and you know that they're genetically the same, so that takes that variable out. That's kind of handy. But Dolly the sheep was a different one. It's more similar to IVF. So in IVF treatment for humans, you take a bunch of eggs and a bunch of sperm and you slush them together. You check to see which ones take.
Yep.
And then you stick a whole bunch into mum, and some of them may or may not take, and eventually you end up with children. That's the theory. If, on the other hand, what you do is you take the egg and you suck out the genetic contents of that egg, so goodbye mum, and then you take some genetic material from another animal, in this case, in Dolly's case, and the reason they call it Dolly, named after Dolly Parton, is they took it from the mammary gland of an adult sheep. Dolly Parton is well known for her singing. And put it in the egg, and then incubated that egg, and it grew, and they put it inside of a surrogate, not a robot, a sheep, and it grew, and out came Dolly. Hurrah! So Dolly now only has the genetic material from the one donor, which was, in fact, a female. So there was no father involved, only a mother and a surrogate mother. In theory, you could have put Dolly into her own mother, but they didn't. So that sounds really easy. You could then, if you want to clone your child,
so they still grew Dolly
in a womb,
traditional way.
In a womb, yes. Yeah, we don't have any, artificial wombs yet.
Like this film suggested, a machine that would grow.
And every science fiction, they always have like a vat, which they do this in, which is kind of cool. And it's sort of important because in order to make it a viable movie, you usually have to have accelerated growth. But,
you do.
But Dolly then... So if you wanted your kid, say your child was in a tragic car accident, you take a bit of skin sample, get an egg from mum, suck out the guts, stick the child's bit in, pop it back in a mum, bingo, you've got a genetic twin, basically, of the lost child. Very nice in theory, but it took 276 goes for Dolly to be born, which would require 276 surrogates, which might be awkward to try and find so many to get one cloned child. So that's
ethically a bit questionable.
And of those 276, a lot of them just never took.
Yeah.
Some of them were born but had major difficulties.
Yeah.
And as a scientist guy, what's his name?
Edward.
No.
No, but in this film, Edward says that, doesn't he? He says if something's wrong, they'll have organs outside their body. And, you remember that?
Yeah, he says that, but I'm just sort of going and saying...
So he does, what they've cleverly done is referred it to that real kind of point of view on it, haven't they?
Yeah, I was trying to find a quote here. I've got this quote from the scientist who actually cloned Dolly when it comes to... I can't... No, here we go. So he says the likelihood is you would get pregnancy losses, abnormal births. For example, one of the lambs, his lab cloned, soon after Dolly, developed lung problems that caused it to hyperventilate and regularly pass out. And he says, it was distressing enough to see that in an animal. I wouldn't want to be the person who looked a cloned child on the face and said, very sorry. And he says, with recent advances in gene editing technology, the need for cloning to correct genetic errors will decline further. There's even less reason for doing it now than before. So there's not much point in cloning humans. And primates in general are very difficult to clone.
Well, yeah, in that context of that process of cloning, right? So whereas the process of cloning we see in this film is totally different.
All right, in the movies, that the cloning, you could well imagine you would. I'm not really sure. They sort of. Actually, what is
like what he
name? Wilmot.
What he is saying, because he's saying genetic editing, so you'd be better to just go into the genetics of a father and a mother and kind of go through their genetics and go, oh, you've got a disposition of cancer, of shortness, like just delete those things, right? So that makes more sense than cloning, which to me makes a lot of sense. It's much safer and whatever. Or blindness, any sort of defects, and even you could get to the point, the other side of that, which goes more sci-fi, is of course, then you go, yeah, let's make them run a bit faster and let's make them a bit more intelligent. The possibilities are a bit funny, aren't they? Whereas cloning is like you go to all that effort, and yet the clone could come out with organs on the outside.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed, because you've got to go through a birthing process. I mean, if you're talking about a vat, though, I imagine you'd probably seed the vat with a lot of genetic material, because when you're talking about gene editing, the reason we've taken an egg and pulled its genetic material out, so there's the chromosomes you want to pull out, but there's other machinery inside the egg which allows for growth and development. And you need that because the genetic material you put in there needs to be turned into a stem cell. And a stem cell is one of these cells that can turn into any other cell. But we're getting better and better at taking just like a human adult cell and then applying treatment to it and turning it into a stem cell, like into different things. Yes. That's getting more and more along. So the idea that we'd have to clone, create embryo clones, because this is one of the reasons I'm talking about, and why cloning was banned, is not so much that they're worried about making people, because we already know how to make people.
It's easy to make
people,
easy.
Really. It's sometimes,
too easy.
For some people, too easy. For some people, it's a bit more tricky, but we've got ways around it. But it's more the case that you grow up these stem cells, because when they're at that blastocyst stage, so they're not anything. They're 100% potential. Yeah. They're not a human at that point. They're just cells where the cells could differentiate into stuff. Like they haven't formed nerves or muscle or skin or anything like that. They're just these protozoans. The idea is that you clone that, and then you can inject that into damaged heart tissue, and it'll become heart tissue. But that, of course, has problems because you got to harvest eggs, and it's less than ideal in many ways. But what they're finding, of course, is now you can just take an adult cell from the person. Say you're having some heart troubles, and you're not saying you're having heart troubles, but you're having heart troubles, and someone takes one of your cells, messes about with it with the right sort of hormones and treatments, and then turns it in a heart cell a differentiated heart cell, and they stick it back in your heart to repair the damage. Much easier, and that's in quotation marks there, you can't see it, of course. It's much easier than cloning an embryo in order to, and that's really the whole thing. That's why there's not a lot of human cloning research being done. There's an ethical consideration, but there's actually just been better technologies come along for the sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, really, what has to happen is a person needs to invent that vat.
Oh, if we're cloning vats,
if someone created the vat, that would change.
It'd be sixth day, or replicas, and heck, I'd do it. I'd have a clone of me on standby with a blank slate ready to go.
Well, everyone would, wouldn't they?
Pop your brain in there. No problem.
Well, like we said before, his wife sort of feels so fantastic, and you really, when you break it down, you're like, yeah, well, her body's 17 days old. It doesn't have the scars and the scratches and the broken nose and this and that our bodies have.
Yeah, your body would have grown
and teeth and
according to its DNA blueprint. Without the rigors and stress, which of course is the problem because it won't have any muscle tone. Or musculature much at all.
But
the
vat's overcome that.
The vat deals with it. You've got to get the levels right. You've got to keep the levels right.
Keep the levels right. You're all right. Yeah. Keep the power running. You're okay.
Yeah, that's sweet.
There's plenty. We've got everything here. The amino acids and stuff. He says, remember, we've got everything. The protein.
Yeah, it's it did actually look like those, protein
shakes
jars you get from the health food store.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, you can go into all the ethics and stuff, and there's a good reason. The other reason we can't clone humans is the genetic material machinery inside the egg to enable it to grow is tightly coupled to the genetic material. In other animals, mice, cats, dogs, and so forth, it is not. So it's much easier to clone them than humans and primates. But that's sort of the science. And Dolly, you should really have a bit of a read about Dolly the sheep. And
Dolly's so fascinating.
What it meant in terms of scientific discovery, because everyone immediately thought, oh, we're going to be able to clone our pets and people. And, you get the 6 Day movie by Arnie, which is a great show, and replicas and so forth. The reality of it, the legacy of Dolly was not at all the fact that we could clone people, but rather that adult DNA, adult genetic material could be regressed back to a youthful state. That's what they discovered. They went, wow, we took a 6-year-old sheep's cell and then turned it into a baby sheep. When the thought was that it wasn't intended, they weren't intending to do that. The adult cells were used as a control for the experiment. They were expecting the young cells to work, and that the young cells work too. Yeah. But Dolly came out of a 6-year-old, which is a middle-aged sheep. Then they went, oh, hold the phone, we could get adult cells regressing and acting like, youthful cells. That's part of the step towards, a fountain of youth, basically. If you're talking about treatments or, healing people, well, we don't have to clone babies and then mince them up and turn them to veal and whatever else.
And feed them to the people.
Feed them back.
Soylent Green. Keep
okay, that's our next movie after the Chris's of Christmas. It's so there we go. It's a fascinating story.
Clone babies and mince them up and feed them to the population. All right, the Three Chris's movie has gone down a sinister path now.
That's the Christmas.
Hemsworth, are you still up for it?
Chris of Christmas future. That's a dark future, that one.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so what about some cinematography and lighting, sound? Because you spoke a bit about sound and things.
Yeah, well, we talked about a couple of moments. I mean, I've said the montages are really good in this. We had the montages with Zoe twice in a row, which is quite interesting. So they kind of like, the filmmakers obviously kept them going. And they were great little montages, you know, the one of him figuring out all the memories and all the bits and pieces. And then later there's like him having to let go of Zoe. And so he like packs up the room and stuff. So it's a couple of great little montages. We also then, with his wife, just to pick on cinematography, we had the good old Russian film technique of oblique angles. So this is where the camera kind of goes on a weird angle. And so when she does do her jogging and then she suddenly stops and pauses and holds her belly, the camera tweaks onto a weird angle. So it's not high, it's not low, it's not middle, you know, it's not straightforward, which most shots are. It's actually off kilter.
And I really noticed that there was that scene where he says, I've got to go off. And there's like the two kids and Mona sort of standing in a line. And she says, that's okay, you do that. And then she kind of looks towards the kids and the kids look to her. But that angle, now you say it, the camera was below her shoulder level, kind of angled upwards slightly. Yeah. And it gives you that sinister, like,
there was definitely a sinister vibe there,
strange going on.
There is something strange. So there's oblique angles there for the really weird feelings from Mona, and that reoccurred a couple of more times. That when they do that scene where the daughter's looking for the phones, she comes in the lounge, she suddenly stops, and it's like, you can just tell she's kind of thinking something's missing here. I don't know what the hell is missing, but something is not right in this scene right now, right? And oblique angles are used there. The sound, I think, in this film was actually, it was the key film code that stood out to me. And so I've talked a bit about when he did his magic, when he did his essence of his job. There was this great orchestral score going on, and it just, to me, pulled me into... it reminded me of Minority Report, because I think in Minority Report, Tom Cruise doing his you know, using his hands on the big 3-dimensional computer was really cool at the time. I think here they've kind of like stepped it up a notch, and it's it's the same. I've seen other films where a surgeon does a procedure and they do that. They like run some pretty powerful music, and it's almost like whatever's going on around them disappears. And that's what I found here with Bill. Like, he was doing his thing on the brain. We could see the brain, and they just totally immersed it with some beautiful music and made it his thing. And then that's why when in that scene he's deleting the memories, the sound is also really super powerful, because it goes from happy, upbeat music, and as he is deleting his daughter's memory, you know, his memories of his daughter, and we see it like physically, it goes red and it like symbolically breaks down into black as the memory deletes. And as you said, we have like a child like laughing and then, you know, like distorting out. And they did it to the music as well. And that scene is just like, wow, this, like, I was very pulled into that. I thought that's a really cool thing they've done there with the sound. Yeah, there's also, during the actual death scene, so I'm talking about the car crash, there's then also like a weird, like him doing a voiceover about it and like talking, and it's distorted and it's weird. And we talk about like in sound being diegetic or non-diegetic. So meaning that diegetic is the sound in the world of the film. So, you know, if you and I are in a movie right now, it might be the sound of this room, it might be the fridge, it might be the microphones, it might be the chair creaking, whatever the sounds are that make this a real world. But then the non-diegetic is the music that the audience hear while you and I are talking, or whatever it might be.
The sinister orchestral music.
Yeah, that someone is creeping by outside the window.
That's my golden retriever walking back and forth looking for food.
You know, like he's coming for his dinner. And so, like, that's the non-diegetic. And but in that death scene, it's like they kind of mix the two. And I mean, again, other films have done this too, where you have... you know, the sound is because he's so encompassed into that world of
It gives you that feeling of
the
different
death, like,
time
it pulls it
scales
in.
overlapping.
Yeah.
Like as if you're hearing he's saying Mona, kids, and that's kind of distorted, but it's overlaid him not talking and searching as if he's done a couple of rounds of it.
But it also isolates, doesn't it? That the moment is him, it's like his world has just collapsed. So you don't need to hear the rushing water anymore, and you don't need to hear like the sounds of nature, which would exist, but they kind of get droned off. And in fact, humans, we do this, don't we? We've evolved. We don't have to worry about the tiger or the Hugo outside the door, your lab. We don't need to so much stress about the tiger outside our window, like going to kill us, right? As cavemen did. So it's like we can hyper focus. So we actually, there's these sounds around us that we delete now. Our brain deletes them. Our ear hears them, but our brain deletes them. And so in this moment, it's just he's hyper focused on the death, unfortunately, of his family. And so the outside sound disappears.
Yeah.
So that's what I really wanted to focus on. I think the sound of this film really picks it up. But as always, let me know what you thought about the film language of.
And speaking of other things to
social media,
to talk about is, of course, this whole controversy of cloning and mind replication, and is a replicated mind the same mind?
Yeah, I don't know.
I go back and forth between the two. You sort of think, well, on one hand, from moment to moment, our mind is changing anyway. Like, if you took a brain scan of me 3 minutes ago and a brain scan now, there would be differences.
Yeah.
And certainly when you're looking, when I was a 5-year-old to where I am now, my brain, structure, even everything about it has changed.
Yeah.
I'm glad it has. Otherwise, I'd still be, like a 5-year-old, wouldn't I? And so this is that funny thing. People say, "Oh, people never change." You go, "Well, from a baby to now, that they've not changed. They're still the same baby." Like, I beg to differ. But and so you could sort of say, well, moving into a new clone body, there's differences, and it'll be a sharp difference. But how would that be different from if I fell over and hit my head and got a bit of concussion? Went into a coma for 2 days and then woke up, I would be a bit different as well. But you wouldn't say, and people do wake from comas with slight personality changes, and so forth. But nobody says, "Oh, it's not Bill." It's still Bill. It's just
But that also itself, like I had a severe car crash when I was 18, and it changed me. And I also, you talk about getting your nose broken, like, it was the same for me. Like, I got punched, like, king hit. So not involved in a fight, like someone just king hit me. And that changed me. That changed my behavior, right? Because that's human, isn't it? Like, we haven't, like, and you and I are fathers. Again, like, even we've talked about it a lot tonight with this movie, like, even watching a film being a father versus watching a film being a father that then kind of has a father theme in it. You look at the film, you look at it differently, and you can even your human brain can actually even see the difference, right?
Yeah.
You're watching
absolutely.
it going, oh yeah, if I was 20, I wouldn't look at this the same way. And so, it's you change, don't you? You change.
And so
constantly change.
how is it different from being transferred?
I don't know.
This is where I keep going back and forwards. Is I sort of think, well, it's just. I mean, if you went into surgery and you have your general anaesthetic and then you just wake up.
Yeah.
If during that time you'd been transferred to a new body, you
would have never.
There'd be no difference.
No. Because I had that, a couple of years ago in my procedure, and you wake up and you're kind of a bit weird, and you feel a little bit weird.
Yeah,
and
like
you feel a little bit out of your body.
And really, you are different from when you went in. Absolutely.
You are, because you've had that experience.
You're measurably different. If someone had taken a bunch of measurements of what was going on in your brain,
and that's what they do, don't they?
After,
they do take a couple of measurements, don't they?
You'd be noticeably different.
That's a good point.
So let us know what you think about this. So I flop
Would
back.
you clone
I
yourself?
flip and flop backwards and forwards between the two, but I can see the arguments. So
I
us
guess
know.
this film is perfectly sound in that argument, isn't it? Sorry, that because at the start it's like, can you take a human brain and put it into a robot? And the answer is no. And then it's like, can you take a human brain and put it into a cloned version of yourself? Well, the answer is yes, because you can feel your body. So like you said, if you went into hospital and they put you to sleep and then you woke up in your new body, would you reject it? Probably not, because you kind of been sent into it, haven't you? Like you wouldn't really know the difference.
It'd just be creepy though if you looked over next to you and there's another one of you who looks over at you and you sort of
learn very quickly in the first few of the here's your old body. You'd be like, they go, oh, okay, we shouldn't show the old body.
Especially if it's going.
Why does it keep failing?
It still waves back at you. Sure, man. I'm going to the incinerator now.
Yeah.
Catch you on the flip side.
Remember to feed Hugo.
That was me that died. Because that's the problem, is when you have the two copies, you go, no, now that is a copy. It's still a valid person.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and it is with Bill. That's the thing with Bill putting himself into the robot.
Oh, I love that bit.
Robot.
Yeah.
No, but that's the thing. Isn't
says, how do you feel?
Yeah.
You ask him, how do you feel? He says, it might sound strange, but I feel like me.
Me, yeah. Because that's the algorithm, right?
Yes.
So he's felt in, And then he's like, see, that's where I feel like at the end of this film, that could then be a whole nother film, is like, once he's in the robot part, he's living a new life, but he thinks he's Bill. He feels he's Bill. He feels like that's what the algorithm has done. It's like made him feel like he's Bill, right? He's okay. Even though he's in a robot body, and he knows he's in a robot body. He's able to then like do the procedure and shit. Doesn't he then go off and like kind of go, yeah, but I want to do stuff in my life. Like I'm not just a robot.
Yeah. Well, I found that funny because clearly he doesn't have the same emotion for his family.
Yeah, because wouldn't he like want to stay?
Because Bill was so... there's a TV show on Netflix. What's that called? Jeez, I can't remember.
No, I might disagree with you, sorry, because he goes, oh, the right thing to do is like save the family. You save the family physically. This is the thing. So this is a good question, right?
Oh,
you duplicate yourself, and in a life or death situation, you're like, one of you has to stay here to do something, but the other one will save the family, like physically take the family somewhere else, your wife and your kids. But for them to survive, you have to stay here.
Yeah, well, that is...
Right, and so it's the same job. It is the same job. It's that you go, yeah, well, like mentally, I have to stay here for them to be safe.
Would you feel satisfied that you have essentially carried out that sacrifice?
Yeah.
And got, okay.
And I think you
That's the question we need to answer then.
Yes.
From the audience is,
yes.
Does that work? Does that scenario put out by Mike? I like that. We should. How many more Chris's do we know?
How many Chris's can we put in a Chris pun?
It must be more. Okay.
Let us know how many Chris's are out there.
Let us know. So yeah, you can get in touch with us. At gravityundone.com or .net. Or .com, they both get the same spot anyway.
Probably if you Google Gravity Undone.
Space Brains Podcast.
Yeah. Check out my website. You'll find
Mark Regan,
us.
Filmmaker. You get on there, just Google Space Brains, and we're
Facebook,
we're the top
Twitter. We're on all of those
responses.
Cloning company websites.
Cloned, yeah. And that's it for me.
And check out the 3 Chris's at Christmas movie coming soon.
Next week's classic.
Starring Hemsworth.
Next episode's classic movie, Fifth Element.
Oh.
Get in there, see it, big bada boom.
Bada bing, bada boom, bada boom.
And we'll...
flying cars, flying cars. Where's my flying car?
See ya.
See ya.